All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Ulrich, here with Bob Rose. How you doing tonight, Bob?
I'm hanging in there, Alan. I hope you and your family are doing well.
Oh yeah, the city's getting back to normal after Super Bowl week. I tell you what, New Orleans made a great push to say they should be in the rotation. And you and I talked about this yesterday. Not yesterday, last week. That the New Orleans should be in the Super Bowl rotation along with the Miami, San Diego, maybe the Rose Bowl, Pasadena. Just be in that standard rotation each year. But just because everything is so convenient. You stay at the hotel, you can walk to the stadium. You're in walking distance of the restaurants. They had the convention center set up for a lot of the NFL experience. That's walking distance. Everywhere you can go is right there. You're right by the French Quarter from the stadium. So it's just one of those cities that they know how to put on a show. They have the entertainment. They have the music, the food, everything. And it's really a shame because Roger Goodell, your favorite person and mine, loves to reward these cities who spend $1 billion putting a stadium together with a new stadium, with a Super Bowl, because you built a new stadium for your team. And when you end up in Los Angeles or you end up in New York and you're really in New Jersey, you're so far removed from everything that it's a hassle. And if you go up to Minnesota, you're dealing with the cold and the snow and the ice and everything else. So it's tough. It's tough to justify keeping New Orleans out. It's an older stadium, but yeah, you need to. The stadium aside, you need to keep New Orleans. You need to keep New Orleans in the mix.
100% agree. And I throw Miami. Tampa seems to put on a nice show for the Super Bowls. Arizona, I've never heard any complaints about, but certainly Pasadena, San Diego as well. There are also cities deep in tradition, football tradition.
Yeah.
A dozen years, 11 or 12 years had passed since New Orleans had last hosted a Super Bowl. And that's a ridiculous stretch of time. I know that they want more cities in the rotation, and I get why. But to leave New Orleans out of the mix for over a decade is just, it's beyond ridiculous. And you should really be talking about a minimum of a six-year swing between New Orleans hosting Super Bowls.
Yeah, Miami and New Orleans both have hosted 11 Super Bowls.
Yep.
Both of them have been in two different stadiums because Miami started out in the Orange Bowl and then went to, what is it even called now? Is it Hard Rock Stadium?
I don't even know. And insert sponsor name here. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Sun Life Stadium when the Saints played in the Super Bowl, but it was Landshark Stadium when the Saints played the Dolphins earlier that season in 2009. I still know it as Joe Robbie Stadium.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's there's a reason why those two cities get the Super Bowl as often as they do. And it's because they're built to bring in the tourists and to do things so people have things to do Super Bowl week. And you're right, they did an outstanding job. I really, really, I didn't go down to the madness just because I didn't want to have to deal with the people. I saw all the videos and everything else like that. I had a lot of friends that went down there. My daughter went down there, took a picture with the trophy, the whole bit. But yeah, that's not me. People, that's kind of how I am when it comes to that. Just because I just couldn't deal with $70 parking and all that stuff. No, thank you. No, thank you. Let the tourists enjoy all that. Not me. Although They had so much security down there. It was probably the safest that you've ever been down in the quarter and stuff since right after Katrina, because they had so many first responders and so many police and National Guard that were there still from Katrina. That was probably the only other time I felt that safe. Um, so Kellen Moore has now officially become the 19th head coach in franchise history. He's the 12th actual permanent head coach. When they say 19, that's 7 different interim coaches, including 3 in 2012 alone.
Right.
Because you had Joe Vitt, you had Aaron Cromer, and there was one other one that came in too. But you had 3 different head coaches that year. But yeah, there's 19 total coaches, but this is the 12th official, not interim head coach. This took forever because the Eagles won the Super Bowl. The Eagles won the Super Bowl. Kellen Moore, like he did an outstanding job balancing out his interviews along with putting together a game plan that really had the Chiefs defense on its heels. And Steve Spagnuolo had no answer for anything that they wanted to do. What does Kellen Moore bring to the Saints as a head coach?
I think just that, you and I talked last week about, us being very curious, about how focused Moore was going to be, balancing between preparing for the game and at the same time, even though he couldn't officially accept the job until after the Super Bowl, he was making phone calls and texts and emails trying to set up his staff. So, make no mistake about it. The staff announcements will be coming very quickly over the next couple of days. But yeah, I mean, that's the part about Kellen Moore that most impresses me. Basically his organizational skills, which you need desperately, as a head coach. I do like the fact that he's young. I got to be honest, he wasn't on my top 2 or 3.
No.
Coming into the off season, but it was very clear that he was on the Saints short list, which is why, as you said, this took so long, because you couldn't finalize the hire until the Eagles were done playing. For what it's worth, Dan Quinn was the last head coach hired in the cycle last year, and he did a wonderful job. With the Washington Redskins, this year. So I understand why a lot of people are concerned. Hey, Kellen is behind everybody else as far as setting up a staff and everything like that. But he's also been doing as much diligence as he can, behind closed doors, reaching out to probably the people he knows and has worked with. And you can't deny the success that Kellen has had as an offensive coordinator in professional football. Say what you will about the Dallas Cowboys team and results, but the Cowboys always had one of the league's more explosive offenses. And then I got to give Kellen credit. With the Cowboys and Dak Prescott and CD Lamb and those guys, the Cowboys were always pass heavy and near the top of the league in passing attempts year in and year out. Well, this year the Eagles were dead last in passing attempts and first overall in rushing attempts. Second in rushing yardage whatsoever, altogether. Excuse me. Kellen has always gotten the most, out of his star players. CD Lamb. Obviously Saquon Barkley and a few others had career years when they were working, playing for Kellen Moore. But what sticks out too is, Kellen has been able to develop complementary talent. A couple running backs in Dallas, couple receivers in Dallas. You look at Jahan Dotson and the tight end depth in Philadelphia, and the way he used Gainwell. So don't get attracted. Don't think to yourself, anybody could run an offense with Saquon Barkley or CD Lamb. No, he developed young players too, to be effective complementary weapons. And and they said, I hate Tom Brady, but I came around to respecting his abilities as an analyst, and with a couple things, as the games that I would watch, a few games that I would watch with Brady announcing, Yeah, he would hit the nail on the head, and he pointed out, how Kellen Moore's system adapted to what Jalen Hurts does best as a player, and that's the ultimate compliment that you can pay to a coach: is you play to their strengths and you minimize their weaknesses.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing because the thing that impressed me about Kellen Moore is he didn't try and turn the Eagles into what he experienced in Dallas, and he had the weapons to do it.
Hmm.
There's no reason why he couldn't have AJ Brown play the role of CD Lamb and having is it Genty? No, it's the little skinny Alabama receiver.
Oh, Devonta Smith.
Devonta Smith. Thank you. Because Genty's in Cleveland, but have Devonta Smith basically be Michael Gallup, and do those sort of things that he did in Dallas, but he knew that Jalen Hurts is not Dak Prescott, that Jalen Hurts doesn't do well throwing the ball all over the yard. And you've got to Saquon Barkley, so run him. I think at the beginning of this season, they were trying to throw the ball a little bit more, and he's like, I'm wasting my time. This team is built to run. They've got the offensive line to do it. That's what we're going to do. And to me, when he starts to analyze the Saints and what do they do well? Well, what did we complain about these past 3 years? What do the Saints do well? They don't do anything well. And a lot of it is because of coaching. So
Yeah.
I think that, he's going to look at this and go, I've got Taysom Hill. I can try and do some things with him. I've got Alvin Kamara. I can try and do some things with him. I got Rashid Shaheed. That's a speed guy. I can do things with him. I've got 2 solid tackles. I've got a Pro Bowl center who, when healthy, is one of the best centers in the league. I need to upgrade my interior offensive line.
Mhm.
But if I can get a bell cow running back to complement the other 2 pieces I have, Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara, maybe I can do something running the ball in the beginning to protect my weakness at quarterback, whether it's Derek Carr or Spencer Rattler or a draft pick if they decide to do that route. That's the part I like about what Moore does is he tries to adapt his system to the strengths of his players and what they do well and build accordingly. What was one of the reasons why Steve Spagnuolo failed so badly in New Orleans, but he was a great defensive coordinator for the Giants and is a great defensive coordinator for the Chiefs? He tried to make the Saints defensive players fit his system rather than adapt his system to fit the defensive personality of that team, especially coming off of a Greg Williams type of defense, which is totally different than what Spags ran.
Yeah.
And that's why the Saints defense was so bad under him for that 1 year. And the players hated him. Scott Shanley made a joke about it, the fact that it was, what is it about Spagnuolo coming into that Superdome? He has a bad time with his defense. And that's exactly it. So that intrigues me. I'm really curious about what kind of staff he puts together.
Yes.
We've talked about this in the past. We mentioned that Brandon Staley may likely be his defensive coordinator, and Doug Nussmeier will have some role in his offense. I've seen other names thrown out now as possible offensive coordinators, but that Nussmeier has followed him from every location he's been at.
Yes.
That Nussmeier could be his quarterback coach, could be his OC, could be his assistant head coach. He's going to have some role. So who else, if there's anybody that you've heard that could possibly be coming over to the Saints staff with Moore?
Well, first, and I'd love if Nussmeier continued to follow Kellen Moore. I think Doug is an outstanding coach. As you mentioned before, Doug certainly has ties to New Orleans, not only as a player, but his son Garrett playing for LSU.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wouldn't consider that a foregone conclusion. The Philadelphia Eagles have lost their offensive coordinator. You'd think that they'd want to do as much as they can to keep the continuity on that staff, and you can do so by offering the offensive coordinator position along with a ton of money to Nussmeier to stay. Whether he chooses to do so or not, it wouldn't surprise me if New Orleans got into a little bit of a bidding war. Hopefully they win it. Hopefully they win it. But I mean, there's a couple guys. Kellen being an offensive guy, he has certainly a longer list of contacts on that side of the ball than he does the defensive side. But you're potentially talking about. I'm hearing the name, Chris Beatty. Lastly, the Bears offensive coordinator, but work with the Chargers receivers and more. Jamel Singleton, the Eagles running back coach, is a guy I would love, for the Saints to be able to bring over. I threw his name out in an article. Jeff Stoutland, the Eagles offensive line coach. That'd be a major coup if that happened, because Stoutland's been with the Eagles over a decade. Was there before Moore. But if you're looking for that kind of continuity from the Eagles staff, maybe TJ Paganetti, who was Stoutland's assistant O-line coach. Aaron Moorhead, Philadelphia's wide receiver coach, Jason Michelle, the tight end coach, are guys to keep an eye on. And maybe Kellen Moore's brother, Kirby Moore, the offensive coordinator for the University of Missouri. I would be surprised to see Kirby Moore come in as an offensive coordinator, and it certainly wouldn't be the case if Nussmeier is going to follow Kellen. But maybe bring in Kirby as a quarterback coach, wide receiver coach, something like that, to develop him in the NFL. I mean, Kellen started out as an NFL assistant at a very, very young age, really younger than what Kirby Moore would be. So these are some of the names that you could see on the offensive side. Scott Tolzien, who is the Cowboys quarterbacks coach under Kellen Moore, is another name to keep an eye on. Defensively, Jordy Hallberg made fun of me because I made a face when he mentioned Brandon Staley as the defensive coordinator. This morning, Staley's not the name that I'd want there, but I could see the attachment because, again, Moore being an offensive guy, what you want is to bring in somebody with experience, successful experience on the defensive side, because they're basically going to be the head coach on that side of the football. So Brandon Staley, at least via resume, would certainly fill that bill. I'll tell you who I want. The two names that I want either George Edwards, the linebackers coach for the Buccaneers, younger guy, or Clint Hurt, the Eagles defensive line coach. Now, again, with Hurt, you're going to have to offer him the defensive coordinator and probably an associate head coach position. But I mean, you look at the way that Eagles defensive line has played the last couple of years. How could you not want the guy that coached him? That's a name to keep an eye on. A couple of the younger Eagles assistants, Bobby King, the linebackers coach. I mean, he developed Zach Bond into a serviceable football player. That gets my vote. Jeremiah Washburn, the edge rusher and defensive end coach for the Eagles. Christian Parker, the defensive backs coach. I mentioned George Edwards. Giff Smith, coached the defensive line with Brandon Staley, with the Rams. Followed him to the Chargers and actually took over as interim coach. So worked with Kellen Moore after Staley was fired last season. Mm-hmm. So obviously, at least you wouldn't think the Rolodex is going to be as long on the defensive side for Kellen Moore as the offensive side. But there's some names there, and there's some names with experience.
Well, one of the things I heard about with Brandon Staley is a former Vic Fangio disciple.
Yes.
Which is part of the reason why you would see probably a significant scheme change in the defense, because you're looking at getting a guy who, one of the things they're going to have to figure out is what talent do you have on this defensive front? What talent are you going to build around?
And how do you play to it? Exactly what you said before.
Mm-hmm. And one of the names, and I'm curious to see if, as a reclamation project, much like Zach Baum was in Philadelphia when the Eagles signed him. They only signed him to a 1-year deal. Mm-hmm. He's a free agent after this season. Really, he's a free agent effective March 13th or 15th, whenever the new league year starts, if they don't franchise tag him. So I want to see if somebody can do something with Isaiah Foskey. And if that means a scheme change, if that means we're going to nobody plays an actual 3-4 anymore, but they play a hybrid version of the 34 defense, and that's what the Eagles did. I mean, Nolan Smith, Lois Sweat. I'm sorry, I keep calling him Lois. I know someone named Lois Sweat. That's not the person's name, though. Josh Sweat is the person's name. But Josh Sweat, they had him playing as a stand-up linebacker, even though he's really a defensive end. To me, if you can find somebody who can unlock Isaiah Foskey like they unlocked Zach Baun, that's a coup, because part of the problem this team has had is the inability to develop some of these draft picks that they take in the second round. And, you know, in the Zach Baun's case, they traded up for him. But just guys that you need to have to be an impact player. And clearly they were impact players in college. So they didn't forget how to play. And it's not like Foskey played at a dump school. He played at Notre Dame, who was in the playoffs again. And unlike previous Notre Dame teams, that Notre Dame team actually did something in the playoffs. They didn't just get their ass kicked because they don't play anybody all year long. So, I mean, Foskey, there's got to be a way to unlock this guy. And if it means a scheme change to a 34 type hybrid defense as a stand-up edge rusher, let's see if they can do something with him, because that takes a huge need off the board. It does place another one, because now you need a big boy in the middle as nose tackle, but you can kind of find those guys and you can kind of work your way around that. Finding somebody who can get to the quarterback consistently, that's the hard one. That's the hard position to get. And that's the one the Saints have kept whiffing on. We'll keep Trey Hendrickson out of the conversation. I'm just talking about high draft picks. Drafting in the first round since Cam Jordan in 2011. So, it's just, now Fasul is another one. Now he's had injuries, so that's kind of why he's been behind. But when he has been out there, he's done some things. But just somebody to improve some of the young talent that is on this team, and not somebody that we're going to end up cutting. They go to another team with more talent around them, and then all of a sudden they turn it on, and we all start going, yeah, look at the Saints. They just can't. They can't figure out how to use players. Another Zach Baun, another Trey Hendrickson, another Rob Nikovich. Just go down the list. Strength and conditioning coach. It's the soft tissue injuries. Although this year it wasn't just soft tissue. I mean, broken bones. Paulson Adebo broke his leg. Derek Carr broke his hand. A torn knee for Taysom Hill. I mean, the soft tissue injuries are a problem, but concussions and that kind of stuff. Strength conditioning coach is going to fix that. But yeah, and a guy that you and I both liked, and I kind of liked him a little bit more, but Ford from University of Texas, that could be a great inside linebacker in a 3-4 scheme.
Oh heck yeah!
Um,
And we said it when he was drafted that it's not that I said it at the time. It's not that I didn't like him as a player, but I got Zach Bond flashbacks because I'm like,
mhm.
okay, that was a square peg in a round hole, and I got the same kind of vibe, but clearly. And Brendan and I mentioned it on the one of our Bayou Blitz pre or post game shows. Clearly, the Saints loved Jalen Ford because even though he only got like one game of action, they went to extra efforts to make sure that no team could poach him. They didn't release him at the end of the preseason hoping to bring him back to the practice squad. They kept him on the active roster as a game day inactive all year long.
Mhm.
They did not let him see 1 second of practice squad because they were afraid they were going to lose him. So clearly they believe they have something there.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what whoever the defensive coordinator is, what they do with these pieces. And I think regardless if they go to a 34 hybrid or stick with a 4-3, it's going to be a whole new evaluation. All these players have to prove themselves all over again. And gone away now is the 4-2-5 scheme of Dennis Allen. It'll be 3 linebackers out there, and which 3 they are, we don't know because there's a draft. There's some free agent changes that are going to happen. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, the one that the lazy analysts like Coward, people like him are saying, well, look, the Saints have salary cap problems and things like that. The Saints always have salary cap problems. And they figure out a way to get around the salary cap.
Mm-hmm.
Some fans don't like it because they just want to get rid of the old players and stuff, but it's credit card debt you've accumulated. You've already bought the products. You've already used the products. Whether or not they're worn out, you're still got to account for the bill that you generated. So you can't just throw away the TV and go buy yourself another because you're still paying on the TV you just threw out.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have money to buy a new TV. So what's yours? There's several ways to look at this, and I guess the question I'm going to ask you is, how would you go about straightening out some of the cap just to function this year and get your money so you have enough money maybe to sign a couple of your own free agents to allow yourself to draft and to get under the cap? What are the kind of things you would look at?
Well, I mean, you have to
hemisphere.
Yeah, you did. You have to restructure some of your recently signed deals to the younger players, the McCoy, the Ruiz, Kamara, obviously, players like that. You have, and folks, you're going to hate me, but you have to restructure Derek Carr's contract. You can't just let him, go to the wind and take that $30 million cap hit, because that's $30 million, that you need, to reshuffle. You can do that next year. You can't. Business logic 101 tells you simply cannot do that this year. You need Derek Carr's contract on your team, so that way you can push back some of that bonus, so that way you can afford to field a team. And you said it before we went on the air, Alan. We're not even talking big money free agent signings. We're talking warm body signings.
Mm-hmm.
And that credit card debt that you talk about, that they keep kicking the can down the road. That's why they're in that situation. The days of restructuring Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, they're over.
Yeah.
You can't do that anymore. You can't cut them. Well, I mean, you could cut them. You would still have to take a cap hit, but not a major one, not like you would with Carr. But yeah, I mean, like I said, you look at the young contracts that you just recently signed, the Ruiz, the Kamara, the guys who could still play, who are still in their prime, at least in theory. you have a year or two to play with them. In fact, I think they set up Alvin Kamara's contract to specifically do that, and that's a very Saints thing to do. You sign your star player to a multi-year deal, but then the very next year you end up restructuring him. They do that with a plan in advance. So we're going to hear a lot of the same old, as far as the type of contract restructurings. We're just going to see different names involved, and really you have no choice but to do that.
Yeah, once you've gone down the restructuring road, you kind of have to stick with it until these contracts expire. And the good news is your cap grows every year, so you eventually have grown to the point where you can afford to eat the difference. And if you restructure Derek Carr, that doesn't commit you to keep him the length of that contract. What you're doing is you're just pushing the money out until later years where enough of the other contracts have fallen off that now you can afford to eat the rest of his deal. And that could be as early as 2027. You get rid of him in 2026, split the difference over 26 and 27, or put it in ghost years. So in 2027, 2028, you're technically paying for him, but he's long gone. Mm-hmm. But it's a plan. Your first step in a plan, though, is to get the money loosened or moved around just so you can function as a team. And the second thing is get a guy in the building who is an acceptable alternative to Derek Carr. And in my mind, that's got to be a draft pick. Now, do you do it this year? Possibly. Likely, in my mind, likely you are drafting a quarterback. I'm not saying you're drafting him at 9, and you're not trading up to go get a guy. I hope not. But Kellen Moore's plan is going to be at some point, we're going to bring a guy in, whether it's Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, somebody like that, and then we're going to put him in and see if he can compete with Rattler. I don't think Hayner is going to be here, but compete with Rattler and see what you got with him. And he may be a guy that you feel more confident in. Maybe Rattler grows this offseason that you feel confident that, okay, now we have a guy in place that we can move off of Carr, and it's not going to come crashing to the ground. And it's hard because people want that guy now. They want to go get that guy now. Do essentially what Washington did and draft your quarterback at 2. That's my starter. That's what I'm doing. Or Denver. I cut my version of Russell Wilson, get rid of him, and I lose the rest of my games, but then the next year I go and get Bo Nix, and I roll with Bo Nix. Okay. 2 things. Number one, like you said before we went on air, the Broncos could afford to eat that cap hit. It wasn't good, but they could afford to eat it. Secondly, Sean Payton is not Kellen Moore. Sean Payton's got a Lombardi trophy in his display case. Sean Payton has 16 years of being a head coach, a very successful head coach. He has more credibility than Kellen Moore does, a 36-year-old who, if it goes sideways, his team will turn against him.
Sure.
And the fans will turn against him. Despite all the talk that the fans are like, yeah, we know we're going to suck, but hey, we'll be 0-17 and we'll be number 1 in the draft. No, that's not how this is going to play out.
No.
The fans will be screaming for everyone to get fired, that it was a bad hire. This is why nobody wanted this job.
Right.
This is, I can hear it all. Moore is over his head. He should have never been hired, but this is what you get when you're a beggar, and this is, they might as well kept Darren Rizzi, all the same old Saints crowd.
Yep.
And that's what the Saints want to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
They want to avoid that situation.
And listen, and you're absolutely right. Sean Payton. Sean Payton only had to say two lines. Really one line. One line and a question. I have a Lombardi Trophy and I coached Drew Brees. What'd you do?
Yeah.
That buys Sean Payton, a good amount of goodwill. And when the Denver Broncos brought in Sean Payton, it was with a different ideal than why this New Orleans Saints brought in Kellen Moore. When the Broncos brought in Sean Payton, it was you're here because you have a Lombardi Trophy and you coach Drew Brees. We don't want Russell Wilson, but we don't know how to get away from him. You will, and he did. Now, with Kellen Moore and guys, folks with all these coaching hires, it wasn't questions as simple as, okay, Kellen, how are you going to fix your offense? No, it was a lot more specific. Kellen, what? Not do you? What is your plan at quarterback? Hell, it might be. I want Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders, so I want to trade up. To me, that's a nightmare scenario because you got to build this team within the draft. But it could be. It could be. The Facebook, especially Facebook, but Facebook and Twitter draft experts, that are saying, oh no, I don't want Jalen Milroe, I don't want Jackson Dart, I don't want, those are the two main ones, but I don't want Will Howard or Dylan Gabriel. Who cares what you want? Mm-hmm. You're not the coach. Yeah. If Kellen Moore's answer to that question is what is your plan at quarterback, and he says if he's there, or I want to try to figure out a way to get a Jalen Milroe or a Jackson Dart or whomever. Who cares what you think? This is what Kellen Moore wants, and this is why Kellen Moore's in the building, because of the way he answered that question. And like you said before we went on the air, Alan, if Kellen Moore's answer to that question was, I want to draft a quarterback this year, whatever the name is, I want to draft a quarterback this year, he's going to be given the green light to do it. We know that because the Saints front office has done that with coaches in the past. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to cut Derek Carr. It just means that you have your replacement for Derek Carr. Now, if Kellen Moore's answer to that question was, I'll deal with Carr this year. This is how, this is what my plan is to minimize his weaknesses, and I'll focus on drafting next year. It's not that I'm against that plan, but it's an awful big gamble, because if you gamble that your guy is going to be there in the draft next year, and either he isn't, or B, you're not in a position to get him, then you've just lost that gamble. And who knows? Kellen Moore's answer to that might be, my system and the assistants I'm going to bring in and my style, it's going to be enough to fix Derek Carr. Again, fans might not want to hear that, but if it works, all of a sudden, Kellen Moore's a genius now, isn't he? And again, like you said, Alan, that's why he was hired, because of what he's done on the offensive side of the football, because of what he's done with guys like Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts. You think, and I've always liked Jalen Hurts in college, but I'm also the first to admit he's not an elite quarterback. There are, when you and I talk about, or me and Brendan talk about, I call him the names in a hat guy, where you just put a whole bunch of names in a hat and you pull it out, and it could be a Derek Carr, a Geno Smith, or a Russell Wilson, or a Dak Prescott. I throw Dak Prescott in that hat too. Kellen Moore had some success with him. So, I mean, who knows what Kellen Moore's answer to that specific question was. But as you said, Alan, he has a definite black and white plan heading into this.
Yeah, he does. And I think part of it is drafting the quarterback, and it may be a draft this year, maybe a draft next year too. He may think, I'm going to go draft a quarterback every year until we get the guy that looks like he's going to work. And it may be a case where they take a Jalen Milroe in the second round if he's there. Because he may say, look, I'm looking at Jalen Milroe, and I just dealt with Jalen Mills. They're very similar quarterbacks. Milroe's got the stronger arm. He's a faster player. He's a stronger, bigger player than Hurts, but he turns the ball over more than Hurts does. Maybe I can coach him out of some of these turnovers. I can try and use him a little bit like a Hurts player. And I'm just throwing him out because they both played at Alabama,
Right.
and they're a very close comparison as far as players. He could decide, no, I need a guy like Will Howard. I like what he did at Ohio State. I can see the growth on him. He has improved since he went over to Ohio State. And you look at a guy like Jaden Daniels. You look at a guy like Joe Burrow. Both of them came from another school, went to LSU. They definitely took off in a spread system. I'm going to run a spread system. So that's the kind of quarterback I need to run a spread system. But this is not a team that's a quarterback away. This is, Calvin, I can see that too. I agree with you. I thought Milroe definitely regressed this year. And, when we get into the quarterbacks in the draft and so forth, when we get close to the draft, there's going to be every quarterback in this draft has flaws, significant flaws. I'm just talking about as far as not burning a first round pick on a guy who's probably going to be there around pick 40. If you can afford to wait to a third round, maybe you might look at Will Howard in the third round.
Yeah, Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel's a guy I love.
Gabriel's another one, yeah. So there are some options you can do where he's going to bring in a guy just to see what you've got. If he can compete with Spencer Rattler, maybe beat Spencer Rattler out, somebody that you think that, okay, now I got a guy in the building who I trust to turn the offense over to, so now we can move on past Derek Carr. That's what you want to say. Yeah. Well, the thing about Hurts, the funny thing about it is Hurts got benched so Tua could win the national championship. Tua gets hurt. Hurts comes in and wins the next national championship.
Yep.
So, it's one of those things. And I'm just throwing these names, these quarterbacks out. There's a lot that could happen between now and then. But the idea that I'm going to cut Carr and go sign Justin Fields, that's a popular name for people, or go sign Jameis Winston again, who you're still paying for, by the way. He's part of the dead money. $7 million you still got to account for Jameis Winston. But yeah, that's a more realistic path than cutting Carr and trying to sign a veteran guy, because like Bob said, you're taking a hit on your cap that makes it almost impossible for you to get under the cap enough to draft a 9-member draft class or more, because we all want to trade down, and still sign any free agents, including guys like Paulson Adebo and Chase Young and Juwan Johnson, some of the guys that you may actually want to bring back just for a year, just because you don't have anything else.
Yep. So, and I'll tell you another thing. Depending on who the defensive coordinator is going to be, if it's going to be a Staley or a Vic Fangio disciple, there's going to be a lot of personnel changeover on the defensive side. So the free agent, and you know this, Alan, the free agency movement that we're going to see from this team is going to be mid and lower tier free agents on the defensive side that have played in that system. So that way you have guys that know how to run it. Unlike Spagnuolo in 2012 when he came to New Orleans. Was just I feel sorry for Spagnuolo to this day because of the situation that he was thrown into. You're gonna need to field a team, and for all the ABC people, the anybody but Carr people that say, and Alan, I know I've seen you say the same thing to people that I say to them. Just cut Carr, and do what? Run with Rattler. Some of them say, okay, if that's your guy. I vehemently disagree, but then you see the guys, that say, well, sign Sam Darnold, not
Yeah.
sign Geno Smith, sign Jimmy Garoppolo, sign Justin Fields, sign Russell Wilson, sign Kirk Cousins. So you want to cut Derek Carr, still pay for Derek Carr, and then sign a different Derek Carr.
Yeah.
You've literally just doubled your salary hit for this year for the quarterback position, while digging a deeper hole in in your dead cap money for future years to bring in a guy that's no better, if not worse, than the guy you had. Common sense, people. If you keep Carr and draft a guy, it doesn't have to be a first round pick. If you draft a guy in the second or third round and Carr sucks this year, then you have a guy that you can turn to that you're already kind of grooming. You're hoping to groom for a potential spot anyway. So this is why I see that being the most likely scenario.
Well, and I'm looking at the Atlanta Falcons. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm looking at the Atlanta Falcons, what they did with Kirk Cousins and then drafting Michael Penix. It seems stupid to have a $40 million backup, but if you have a guy that you believe in, then you're kind of protecting yourself by having Carr being your $40 million backup, because the other solution to cut Carr and just roll with Rattler and whatever is akin to the 1990 Saints when they just said, you know what, I'm not paying Bobby Hebert. He's going to come crawling back to me begging for a job. I'm going to go with John Fourcade. Well, that turned out to be a disaster. And within 4 games, you're making the Lawrence Welk trade for Steve Walsh because Fourcade was just unworkable. You pulled, I can't believe I'm going to say this about this poor guy, but you pulled Tommy Kramer out of the drunk tank for a little while to try and get him to compete, but he was past his prime. You end up screwing yourself, because now you're in a position where I need a body, somebody who can actually win for me. I don't have salary cap space, so maybe I'm going to have to make trade a first round pick to the Tennessee Titans for Milk Boy. I'm sorry, Mayonnaise Boy, not Milk Boy. That's his problem. He uses mayo instead of milk, but whatever. But yeah, you make a trade for a guy like Will Levis and you give up way too much because you need a quarterback, because Spencer Rattler is so bad, and Kellen Moore can't go 0-6 and 0-7 and 0-8 and still keep this team around him and don't have look at this mistake. We knew you look what you did. You got the guy that nobody wanted this job. He's too young. All the things, all the negative stuff we've been hearing for the past 6 weeks about this job, that Loomis is the problem, that, this is why Mickey Loomis needed to go because he set this poor kid up to fail, all these things. And like you said, too, you're going to sign a version of Derek Carr while you're still paying for Derek Carr. That's what I said before. And this isn't a defense of Derek Carr. Don't get me.
No.
Please don't misunderstand us. We're not saying that Derek Carr is a guy you should keep. We're saying you kind of have to keep him now to afford to get rid of him later, because you've got dead money tied up in Michael Thomas still. You've got dead money tied up in Marshawn Lattimore. It's $31 million right there. And Jameis Winston. And you're going to get Ramczyk in this one too, because Ramczyk's going to retire. He restructured his deal so his cap hit is smaller, but you still have to account for that money that you paid him already. So you're essentially the dad who had a family, divorced his wife, You ended up with the minivan. You hate the minivan because you don't want like the dad, the divorced dad showing up to all the the kids functions. You want to drive the cool car, the single cool car, but all you can afford is a 2004 Hyundai that is leaking so much oil. Of course, the salesman told you that's not oil, that's sweat from all that horsepower. It's leaking oil in the driveway, so you have to buy a quart of oil to dump in this thing every day because that's the equivalent of the quarterback you're going to get to replace their car. Meanwhile, you're still paying for the minivan that you don't own anymore. And now the cool car that you're showing up in, the Hyundai with the driver's door, it's a different color from the other part of the car that's leaking oil and makes all kinds of noise. When you go to cut the wheel, you can hear the power steering. You guys all know this car I'm describing. You go, oh my God, it's my college car. What are you talking about? But yeah, you're now into this position. Because you're going to get the Russell Wilson Hyundai, maybe. You're going to get the Tyrod Taylor, something akin to that. And I just don't see it. I want to see a guy brought in as a rookie, a draft pick, that's cheap. And you can actually develop him, and he's your fallback option, or maybe the guy who beats out Spencer Rattler, so Rattler's now your backup. And you're not setting up Kellen Moore to fail because the fans will know, the media will know, well, look, this is a young quarterback. He's trying to develop this guy. This is his first year. He's starting this guy. Meanwhile, you've got Derek Carr on the bench maybe, or you have Derek Carr starting with that rookie in the wings. They see a plan. They see an exit. They see an exit strategy showing up. And that's all that we're saying. Both, I think I'm speaking for you, Bob, but both of us
absolutely.
There's got to be an exit strategy that we can all see.
Yep.
And the exit strategy can't be get out first, then figure out what am I going to do from there. And I think that's the issue. That's really the issue when it comes to, I knew you'd like all that, Dana. I'm a car guy too, not a Derek Carr guy, but a car guy. So believe me, I know the story. And those of you who remember the old Bud Light ads, Real Men of Genius, who remember the used car salesman guy, that's got to be one of my favorite lines. That's not oil, that's sweat from all that horsepower.
and then you hear the singer, horsepower.
Oh, my two favorites have to be that one and Mr. Sports Fan.
Yes.
They say those who can't play coach. Apparently those who can't coach sit shirtless 30 rows back shotting obscenities. I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's it. Providing helpful tips like throw the ball, catch it. That sucks. What a bunch of losers. I'm just like, oh, somebody's reading Saint's Twitter. So, yeah, those. I had a whole collection of them in my old computer. I go back to, my God, this is now we're going to be talking about Livewire and real player and stuff. I had them all stored in my real player. I had a whole folder full of these ads. The toupee wearer, too much cologne guy. I had them all saved because I loved them, But yeah, I really miss those commercials. And that guy, the person who sang was the original singer of Survivor.
Really?
Who sang "Eye of the Tiger," not Jimmy Johnson, not the Jimmy Johnson. His name was Jimmy Johnson, who sang "High on You" and "Search is Over." That was Jimmy Johnson. He passed away about almost 10 years ago now. But the guy who sang "Eye of the Tiger" was the guy who would sing the lines in the old Bud Light commercials. So useless trivia that I got locked up in here. um, okay, so we kind of went through Derek Carr, and we kind of went through some of the roster issues. So some of the other positions, though, you think that Kellen Moore may address. Now, in the beginning of the show, we had a new member come in. I've got to scroll up a little bit here and go pulling his name back up. Mark Gapsky. I hope I'm saying your name right, Mark. He was talking about guys he wanted to draft, and he mentioned, well, of course, Genty from Boise State. Bash, who had a big Senior Bowl game, and Dart he had in there. But Genty is probably one of the more interesting names because that's a realistic person who could be there at 9. Yep. We talked about Jalen Milroe or any kind of quarterback that they may bring in. Bringing a guy in like Genty could be the Saquon Barkley part of this. Would you be interested in drafting, or do you think it would be a good move to draft somebody like that high at number 9?
I'll tell you, I'm certainly not against it because I mean he is such a he's such a talent. That I'm of the school of thought is when you have a chance to get great, you're idiots to pass it up. Now, it's a draft pick. So, I mean, there are plenty of number 1, first round draft choices that 1, 2, many of us thought were going to be great and we're absolutely not. But if you're convinced that Genty is a great player, then you're an idiot for passing him up. Yeah, Alvin Kamara is still a very, very good running back in this league. But one of the things that held this team back was over the last several years, not just last year, was the fact that what were our exact words? There's no backfield complement for Kamara. You can't use Kamara as a receiver, without telegraphing what you're going to do because you have no other threat in the backfield when he's not back there. Well, Genty would certainly give you that threat. A, and B, we know the statistic when running backs start to fall off a cliff. Kamara is right around that age. Now, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't happen. But if it does, you now all of a sudden don't, at least in theory, if the pick works out, you now don't need a running back because you have a guy for at least the next 4 or 5 years, that can be the bell cow to your system. Now I would not, and I again, Saints social media, I see it a lot. Moore had Saquon Barkley, so that means he's going to draft Genty. No, it doesn't. I've been using this phrase a lot.
Yeah.
Dig deeper. Dig deeper. Look a little bit past the headline. Look at Kellen Moore's history. He has done just fine with, I'm not going to say, I don't want to use the word mediocre, but average to middling backs. So he doesn't need a Saquon Barkley to be successful. But if you have a chance to get a Saquon Barkley and you don't, you better have a good reason for passing him up. So no, am I going to mock Genty to the Saints or am I rooting for it necessarily? No, but if he's on the board and you take him, I don't see how you could be mad at it.
Yeah, I mean, there's Calvin put up Mason Graham. I love Mason Graham. I don't know what kind of defense we're going to run. So I don't know if Mason Graham may be a good fit, may not be a good fit anymore. I don't know yet. Yeah. Tyler Warren, another guy I'm in love with. I would love to have a Tyler Warren here. I had Will Campbell's another one. Some of the talk they've had has been if you restructure Carr and you lower his cap hit to $20 million and free up $30 million, you can now bring in a couple free agent offensive linemen in and maybe get Becton away from the from the Eagles and put him at left guard. Now suddenly you've got an offensive lineman, a Flagga, Becton. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but Flagga, right. Becton, McCoy, Ruiz, and Penning. You suddenly now have an offensive line that might be built to run. And if you get the offensive coordinator that you were talking about um, from the Eagles, that it's now going to be a run first kind of team. Now suddenly Genty at 9 makes
Mm-hmm.
tremendous sense because
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be a run first team, and God, that's exactly what you want to have, a power running game. That's the kind of stuff you're going to do. Yeah, I know, Calvin. I said the same thing. And we were
So
talking
did
about as
I.
far as a tackle,
Yeah.
but moving him, kicking him inside to guard was a stroke of genius.
Yeah.
Um, it could have been the coaches that they had. I don't know, but yeah, that's a possibility. Like, in many ways, you kind of have to look at this as a clean slate. And what moves do we make so we can get some of these players that we want? And I know people don't hate this term, but you want to remain competitive, build towards the future. So, some things I want to be able to do to be successful in doing
Mm-hmm.
that. And that would go a long way to making your offensive line better
Mm-hmm.
without burning a lot of draft picks. Now you can focus the draft on defensive players and make your defense that much younger. You need to replace the safeties. You need to get more linebackers. You need to get a pass rusher. You need to get a defensive tackle. All those sort of things. So if I'm just saying, and this is not to dig deeper, but this is just being surface level. If I'm saying Moore wants to duplicate what he just had in Philadelphia, man, Milroe Genty at 9 and then 40, that sure as hell looks a lot like Hurts and Barkley.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying that's the plan. I'm just saying that's an idea you can throw
No,
out
and
there.
don't, yeah, and like there's a big difference between you throwing out the idea and other people just, including the national media idiots,
Mhm.
just automatically assuming that since Kellen Moore had Saquon Barkley, this is what he's going to do for sure. No, an idea, sure, makes sense, sure, possibility, of course, but to assume, no, just look back at the guy's career a little bit before you throw
Yeah.
out an idiotic statement.
Yeah, go ahead and draft the entire Georgia defense. Yeah,
Well, there's a lot of Georgia edge rusher. Two Georgia edge rushers being mocked to the Saints a lot around
mm-hmm.
pick 9. And some other people are combating this, saying, no, neither Georgia edge rusher fits the Saints prototype. Yeah, again, dig deeper because you're talking about different defensive coaches now, and probably a different prototype.
Hey, and if you pass on Genty because you went defense in the draft, that's not to say the Ohio State running backs aren't an option too.
Either of them, I love them both.
I did a mock draft just taking best player available, but needs, and I think I took Mason Graham in the first. Took Milrose second, but I took, let me make sure I got the right one. I don't want to say the wrong name. Hang on here. Because I saved the picture. I posted it on Twitter a few weeks back. Yeah, I thought that's who it was. Quinshon Junkins, and I've just butchered this poor man's name, but yeah, I took him at 71. And unfortunately, there's a run on offensive and defensive linemen all the time in these things. Ashton, it's got to be, it can't be Gillot. Ashton Gillot, the edge rusher from Louisville, I think I had is at 93.
He's rising fast.
Yeah, Caden Prather, the wide receiver from Maryland at 111. The only offensive line I was able to take, I could not get a tight end. Because once I got past 71, the tight ends were gone. It really was.
The Michigan kid Loveland might be a late first round. I think he's a early day 2. Obviously, Tyler Warren is a surefire first round pick. But once you get past Arroyo for Miami, there's not a tight end that really jumps out at me. Not that I've seen film on yet.
Yeah. So then I got Luke Kendra, offensive guard from Cincinnati. I took a safety from Washington, and Cameron. I cannot even guess at this name. Fabi Colin, Culannan, Fabiculannan.
If they draft him, we'll just call him Fabio.
Yeah. Here's the interesting one. At 249, I was able to get Will Shepard out of Colorado.
Really?
He fell that far. Now, this is PFF, so I haven't played any of the other ones yet. But I got Will Shepard at 249, and I talked to my son about it. And he says, yeah, he's really low on a lot of draft boards because I think he's too skinny, too small. It's a local kid, and honestly, I think he's the best receiver. Travis Hunter aside, I think he's the best receiver on Colorado's team. And I really like him, and I was surprised he was still there at 249. And then the last one I took was a defensive tackle from Clemson, DeMonte Capehart. I guess that's how you say his name. But 254, I just took a flyer on him. And that was just me doing very minimal research, no trades, nothing like that. I was just going with what the Saints had. And we haven't even got compensatory picks in there yet. That may give the Saints a couple extra picks. But yeah, that was just trying to address all the needs I could. But I mean, to me, the first 3 or 4 players, you got a defensive tackle, you got a running back, you got an edge rusher, and you got another wide receiver who could possibly be a slot guy, maybe a borderline X guy, and a quarterback that you can try and groom for the future, that you might be able to do some gimmick plays in the beginning with. I mean, that's a good draft. The rest of the guys, you just want to see what they can do. But that's going to be the fun part of this, because all the things that we knew that the Saints used to do, RAS scores, and they go for big linebackers, 6'4" linebackers, like it's the 1970s and 80s again. All that's out the window because it's all new coaches, all new coordinators. It's going to be fun. It's going to be an interesting draft this year. And I think if there's a year they do trade down, I think this is the year they do trade down. Because I know Sean Payton is chomping at the bit to get a hold of Tyler Warren.
Yeah.
He really wants him badly. And I did the math on this. This is the old Jimmy Johnson draft chart. The Saints' 9th pick is worth 1,350 points. So 1,350. So to get for I think Peyton is at 20. So for the Broncos to move up to get that, they have to give us the 20th pick and their second round pick. Plus, they still owe us 100 and something points. So you're looking at probably a 2026 pick thrown in there too.
Maybe might be able to squeeze him for a first, more likely a second. Give you ammunition potentially to move up to get a quarterback in 2026.
Yep, exactly. No, we're still going to use Taysom on third down. But that's the interesting thing. How does Taysom get used? I can't imagine more looking at Taysom. I can't do anything with this guy. No. They're going to do something with Taysom still. But yeah, I mean that's some of the things you can play with now. If you want to move this high up, it's going to cost you X amount of picks. So that's Jimmy Gumbo. I'm not sure. Have you heard anything about Kellen? I know he was in town tonight.
He was in town tonight. The Eagles parade is on Thursday. So I'm sort of thinking Kellen's press conference will likely be on Friday. Do not be surprised if we hear that more specifically tomorrow, though.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think as soon as he gets hired, that's when you're going to start seeing the coaches. Coming in. You're going to see it's going to be a lot of rapid fire news.
Yeah.
So that's a good, yeah. Give us 13, call it a day. Yeah, we'll see how that flies. But yeah, I mean that's just options that you can do, and we're going to talk a lot more into that. That's just the first draft I did without doing any kind of studying, just guys that I knew I wanted, and to see how the draft unfolds. And that's the good news from Kellen Moore is he's got 9 picks to choose from at least. If you trade down, get more picks, you can do more things. And that is the plan, I would think, to rebuild this team. Build it up through the draft, ride out your dead money until it gets to the end. And then in 2027, when you have a lot more cap space, then you can start signing big name players and stuff. But, there's going to be a plan, and he'd probably talk about this. Bayou Blitz tomorrow. Is there going to be a Bayou Blitz tomorrow night or Thursday night?
Brendan is on vacation. So we are not planning on a Bayou Blitz until Sunday morning. And the only reason Sunday morning is what you just said. We knew the Moore hire was coming. But we expect in short succession, like through the weekend, different assistants to start being added very quickly in the coming days. So we believe he's coming back Saturday. So we tentatively have a Bayou Blitz scheduled for Sunday morning, just to get everybody caught up on the news. So no Bayou Blitz till then. Brendan, if you're watching or listening, hope you're enjoying your vacation, man. And Lord knows we'll have a lot to talk about when you get back.
Yeah, you're right about that. Well, good. Well, and as always, Bob's got his articles now at Athlon Sports to keep people updated as things unravel. I think the news that Kellen Moore was going to be the new head coach hit about 11 o'clock my time, maybe 10:30 our time, and Bob had his article out there by 10:45. I was shocked. I'm sitting there scrolling through, seeing, okay, who's got a legitimate source that it's official, and I see Bob Rose's name in there. So that's how fast the news goes. I'm sure it's going to be that way for you for the next few days, and certainly next week. In the meantime, football's over with for now. The league year starts on the 13th. But the Saints news isn't going to start because it's just getting started with all the new coaching hires. Next week, I'm sure that's what we're going to be breaking down, these assistant coaches and how it's going to change the way the Saints are built. In the meantime, thank you guys for joining us. I'm so glad you I saw 23 people at one time were in this chat. So that's really impressive.
Cool.
I'm glad all you guys are discovering this site. We're on every Tuesday night, barring family emergencies or hurricanes, natural disasters, but we're around. Bob's got his columns every week in the or every day practically with Athlon Sports. And then we have the Bayou Blitz that's usually on either Wednesday or Thursday night. So plenty of Saints coverage between the two of us. So in the meantime, thank y'all, and we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.